Adventure is worthwhile. Tawani Hospitality can help. Lincoln Way, a destination inn located in Franklin Grove, Illinois, offers countryside exploration with a range of eco-friendly amenities, including an outdoor fireplace and water garden, and activities like biking and apple picking. Looking to stay close to the city? Langhouse Chicago, located on the north side of Chicago, provides a portal to the excitement of downtown while serving as a historic prairie-style retreat for the whole family. Tawani Hospitality, where indelible experiences become personal history.
Okay. Can you get this? I don't have my wallet.
Oh, really? It's funny how that always happens.
Yeah, it's funny.
With BMO Harris, you don't need your wallet. You can get money from any BMO ATM using your phone.
Uh-oh, looks like someone can buy their own tacos.
Okay.
You could also pay them back with Zelle.
So many ways for you to pay.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not hungry. I'll just have some of yours.
Order for BMO.
Ooh, tacos, banking. Some things are made to be mobile.
That feeling you get when your phone is your wallet. That's the BMO effect.
Lyric Opera presents Verdi's Macbeth, the stunning portrait of Shakespeare's most power-hungry couple and their bloody ascent to the throne, filled with unforgettably beautiful music. Macbeth runs in just 6 performances September 17th to October 9th. Tickets at lyricopera.org.
WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center. Keepers of cosmic secrets.
These particles are fundamentally important.
Neutrinos.
What is its role in the evolution of our universe?
Can they unlock a hidden universe?
It's mind-blowing.
Particles Unknown on Nova. Tonight at 9 on WTTW.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
it allows us to know on how to react to COVID.
Saliva and swabs, COVID testing in schools, and what's behind testing delays at CPS.
Such an open and transparent process driven by community input has never been conducted.
An independent commission's quest to remake Chicago's wards. More on the proposed People's Map.
Chicago's North Side has seen a decrease in affordable housing units. What does that mean for lower income residents?
Chicago's like Afghanistan on a good day. And that's a problem.
Chicago's wealthiest man sounds off on the city's pervasive violence. Our Spotlight Politics team weighs in.
There was less bike infrastructure in Black and Brown neighborhoods and more tickets in Black and Brown neighborhoods.
As Chicago begins a major bike lane expansion, advocates call for more infrastructure and less police enforcement.
As the White Sox head to the playoffs, a look at the profound impact of Latino players on the team and in baseball.
There's no city in the country outside of New York that does what we're able to do in Chicago.
And Broadway in Chicago is back, starting with the musical Rent. We'll take you inside. But first, some of today's top stories. Rush hour commuters on the Purple and Red lines saw trains ground to a halt late this afternoon when a CTA crane collapsed near the Red Line. The crane was being used for work near the Bryn Mawr station. Photos from the Chicago Fire Department social media accounts show an inverted crane cab having fallen over on a nearby car. The fire department says the crash affected power lines and partially evacuated a nearby building. The lines are still experiencing major delays. Illinois Republicans say the state needs to take a tougher stance against violent crime and gun trafficking.
There's no denying that in the state of Illinois, gun violence has become a crisis. We must act. We must take bold steps to hold convicted criminals accountable through strengthened penalties that will make these perpetrators think twice before engaging in any act of gun violence. We must have effective deterrence. We must strengthen penalties because clearly what we are doing now is not deterring crime.
The GOP says it's introduced several bills in the General Assembly aimed at increasing penalties for gun offenders. For example, a first-time offender facing charges of a violent crime with a gun would receive a mandatory 10-year sentence. Republicans also propose better funding for training and retention of police officers. Reports tonight that Chicago historian and activist Timuel Black has entered at-home hospice care. At 102 years old, Black has participated and seen some of history's most pivotal moments. Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge, and a witness to the Buchenwald concentration camp in World War II. Years later, Black would work with Martin Luther King Jr. when he came to Chicago. He attended the March on Washington during the Civil Rights Movement and would go on to help Chicago elect its first Black mayor, Harold Washington. A GoFundMe account has been created to help his wife Zenobia cover the cost of at-home nursing care. The Chicago area woman accused of helping her boyfriend murder her mother at a resort in Indonesia 7 years ago is being released from prison early. Heather Mack, who was 18 at the time, was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison back in 2015, along with her then-boyfriend Tommy Schaefer, who was sentenced to 18 years. Indonesian prison officials say Mack received 34 months of sentence reductions and that she'd shown to be a good person who earned them. Mack, who had given birth to a baby girl just before being convicted, will be released and deported back to the U.S. on October 29th. Up next, taking a peek behind the curtain of Chicago's ward remap process. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Every 10 years, Chicago's map of 50 wards is redrawn, generally behind closed doors. But now an independent group is putting forth what it calls the People's Map, an alternative which they say accurately represents the city's diverse communities without splintering demographics to concentrate power. The 13-member Chicago Ward Advisory Redistricting Commission will need the support of at least 10 alderpeople to prompt a referendum vote by the public. And joining us to explain this proposed map is someone who helped organize this commission, Chandra Van Dyke, Chicago Project Manager of Change Illinois, a local nonprofit that says its purpose is to pursue efficiency and ethics within government policy and elections. Chandra Van Dyke, welcome back to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
All right, just a quick reminder, who is the Chicago Advisory Redistricting Commission and what is the group's role in the remap process?
The Chicago Advisory Redistricting Commission is a community-led redistricting process. So there are 13 commissioners who serve on the commission. They're everyday residents of the city of Chicago who applied in the spring to serve on this commission to ultimately draft a ward map for the residents by the residents of Chicago.
All right, and let's take a look at the map that you revealed today after many community meetings and lots of input. I think we have a graphic showing the breakdown. 15 majority Black wards you would propose, 14 Latino, 2 Latino influence, which means that would have a large number of Latino residents, 13 white majority, and then 1 majority Asian American ward. Why was this the appropriate breakdown, do you believe?
Well, ultimately, it's what the people asked for. This process was completely community-led. The commission hosted over 41 open hearings and received over 525 testimonies that ultimately informed their mapping process and led to the results that we have here. And the reason I think these results are the right ones is because it's the voice of the community. The people who live in the city of Chicago ultimately worked to draft this ward map.
And as we mentioned at the bottom there, it would have the first Asian American majority ward, the first ward where the majority of the population was Asian American. Why was that important?
It was important because those residents came out and they engaged with the commission differently. They lifted their voices. They made sure that they advocated for what was right, but also the numbers supported it. The census data supported that there was a possibility that this one majority Asian ward could exist. And the commission had to make a lot of tough decisions and trade-offs, but ultimately felt that this was the best charter for it.
And here's the problem with ward maps every 10 years. Neighborhoods in Chicago like Englewood and Austin and so many others get carved up into multiple wards. I think Englewood is part of 5 different wards, which makes it really hard for residents to know where to go for their public services. So how did you address that in the map that you drafted?
So the commission worked really hard to keep these communities whole, and specifically for Englewood and also neighborhoods like Austin and Avondale. These neighborhoods and back of the yards are no longer splintered, but these communities are kept whole so that ultimately those communities have the power to vote for representatives that they feel best support them. So it's returning the power of the people back to the people.
And as we mentioned, in order for this map to have a chance at being adopted, you have to get 10 alder people on city council to approve it, and then it goes to a public referendum. So where are you in getting 10 older people?
That is absolutely correct. And that work continues, right? So the first phase of this project was really ensuring that we took the voices of residents and uplifted those voices to create a people power map for the people by the people. But now the process begins where we use the people and we work with the people and engage with the people to build the support from alders. Our hope is that through the people and engaging and educating people in this process, we will get the support of alders and we will continue to engage them up into the December 1st deadline, where we hope that we will have 10 alders who will support the People's Map.
Anyone on board right now? Any names you could throw out there?
Currently, no. I'll be completely transparent and just say that the commission has really focused on getting the people's input. And now that the People's Map is public, I think that now we can say we can work towards getting the support of alders. But prior to having the map, the commission was proven its process, which is that we believe there should be and can be an open and transparent process that engages residents differently than has been done before. And so that process was being proven as the commission did its work. And now that there is a people's map, we hope to use the people to push for council to support the map.
Yeah, and this process has always, as we mentioned, been done behind closed doors, handshake deals, lots of trade-offs, and sometimes it comes down to which older people that their colleagues want out of there. They kind of draw them out of their district. So this would be certainly a change from that. So tell us about the community input that you got. Who showed up and what kinds of things that they talked about?
Yeah, we saw many different residents from all over the city of Chicago show up. As stated before, there were a total of 41 public meetings. Of these 41 meetings, 31 were public hearings, 9 were held in person. We got a wide range of feedback from people, right? People talked about how they wanted their communities to be kept whole. Some people didn't want their communities to be drawn in certain ways, and others wanted to empower other communities. We got a lot of mixed feedback, but all of that information, though, that was done publicly, and it remains public on the commission's website at chicagoswards.org. And anyone who's interested in learning more about the trade-offs the commission had to make, because all of that is public, they can visit the Chicago's Wards website and learn about the commission and its process and actually watch all of the archived public hearings.
And quickly before we go, I want to see if we can put that map up again and just get a sense of what it looks like, what those wards look like. There it is, much more geometric than the current map, with lots of squiggly lines and kind of like a Jenga block. So as you mentioned, tell us again, what's next? When is that deadline?
So the deadline for us to get $10 to vote is December 1st, and we will be in communities engaging and really lifting up the voices of the people as we continue to do this work to push forward for a people's map that's by the people and for the people.
All right, very interesting project, and we will follow it. Our thanks to Chandra Van Dyke. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thank you. Many Illinois students are taking a lot more tests this year. Not exams, but COVID tests, finally underway in some school districts. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda, how is it going so far?
Well, Brandis, could you ever have imagined that parents and students would be clamoring for more tests? But that is actually the situation that we are seeing, particularly in Chicago, as Chicago Public Schools has been slow to roll out COVID testing. The new CEO for CPS, Pedro Martinez, says by the end of last week, testing had made it to all but a dozen CPS schools. But as of last week, less than 4% of students had consented to participate. Not enough, critics say, to give them the assurances they want about COVID. Martinez admits that the consent form is confusing, especially for non-English speaking families. He says it's something he's working on. Still, he says more people are signing up, giving that consent, but that presents a new challenge. He estimates CPS will be able to give about 20,000 COVID tests this week. That is less than the 35,000 students and staff who've signed up.
The question that that we're going to get answered this week is, what is the realistic timeline of that ramp up? And again, the main variable I can share with you is the challenge of our partner to be able to get to staff up. That is a challenge. And by the way, it is a challenge. We have a tight labor market.
Now, Dr. Allison Arwady with the city's public health department says the prerogative is not to test every student all the time. Rather, she says there's CDC goals to get about 10% of the school population tested weekly. She says these in-school tests are for screening purposes.
The screening testing is for people without symptoms. So this is regular testing, and the main reason we do it is to see, are we missing unrecognized spread? It's not about testing every kid every week, every teacher every week. It's about making sure at a district-wide level we're not missing cases of COVID.
Now, Chicago is not alone in waiting. Shield, Illinois, the University of Illinois developed test, is another option. CPS uses a different one that schools statewide can contract with to do the COVID testing and then get reimbursed by the state. And a spokesperson for Shield says 451 school agencies have signed up for that so far. Shield testing is in 173 of them, but the spokesperson says that things are ramping up and testing will be debuting in another 88 schools next week and then 45 districts the week following. Now, on the opposite side, the Hillside School District, super early adopter of Shield testing. It has actually had that in place since January.
Our kids come down by grade level. They have their testing kit. They go to a designated spot that's not near anyone. What they end up doing is, I have my example mask here, where your mask is on. Take your testing kit, go underneath your mouth, and you go ahead and deposit that saliva. You go to another spot, they check it to make sure you have the right amount, and they literally check them in based upon their date of birth and their barcode. Everything's confidential, and we can realistically probably do about 280 to 300 tests in about an hour.
Now, in Hillside, students participating in athletics or any extracurricular activities are required to partake in COVID testing if they want to be part of those school activities. The superintendent at Hillside says about 73% of students have given that consent. Now, you have other families that are hesitant to do so, not on board with it. David Robbins has 2 children who attend Barrington High School, and he has opted out of having them participate in any in-school COVID testing. He's worried about false positives and then any scramble that could set off if they did test positive.
And I don't want them subject to that. I didn't want them subject to, hey, you tested positive, who have you been around? Because this is a big thing, especially with high school kids. They're telling each other, if you test positive, you weren't around me. I mean, this is the reality of it. The kids are not, and they just had homecoming. So it's a big thing. The kids are like, you weren't around me if you test positive. And a lot of kids are saying, don't test.
Now, his son last month had to briefly quarantine when another student tested positive in a rapid test, identified his son as a close contact. But Robin says his son did not meet the CDC definition of close contact, that it was all illogical, and that his son consistently tested negative.
It was like back in the old days when kid was sick, your teacher might, give you a couple homework assignments. I mean, he's in high school, he's a junior in high school, he's falling behind, especially in classes like math that move really quick. So I was really mad at that point, saying I need my kid back at school.
Robin says Illinois is being too cautious and should adopt a model in which you have to test positive for COVID if you're going to be not allowed in school. But in Hillside, the superintendent, Sushinsky, says that COVID testing is going great, doing what he wants it to do.
When a student says that they want to be in person, it delights us. What this has done for us is allows us to fight the spread of COVID. We're able to catch asymptomatic students before it becomes spread. We're able to get it early before it becomes contagious. And so for us, the benefit of testing is not quantifiable. It is priceless. You can't even put a dollar amount on it. And so what it does is gives a level of comfort for our students and for our parents.
He says that even students as young as in the early childhood and preschool classes are able and are participating in that saliva shield testing. Brandis, back to you.
And Amanda, thank you. Renters are finding fewer affordable homes and apartments as the city sees a decline in units. A new study from DePaul University shows the city experienced a 5.2% decline in affordable rental units over the past decade, and the share of lower income renters who face housing insecurity has grown. Joining us now to talk about this are Jose Munoz, Executive Director of La Casa Norte, an organization that serves youth and families confronting homelessness, and Jeff Smith, Executive Director at the Institute for Housing Studies at DePaul University. Welcome to Chicago Tonight, both of you. So first, the north and northwest sides are seeing a particularly steep decline. So comparing affordable units from the average of 2012 to 2014 against the average of 2017 to 2019, Logan Square in Avondale lost about 14% of affordable housing. Portage and Jefferson Park lost 12%, and Lincoln Square, North Center, and Westtown and near West Side, both of those lost a little over 11%. Jeff Smith, let's start with you, please. Why are we seeing this decline?
Well, I think what we're seeing is, the effects of the market on housing affordability. When we look at affordable housing, there are really two components that make up housing affordability. One is directly subsidized affordable housing units, but the other are just sort of lower cost rental housing units that are cheap because they're in older buildings owned by small renters, small landlords. And those types of units are really vulnerable to rising demand in the market from higher income households. And those neighborhoods that you just mentioned are all neighborhoods that are really experiencing that type of increased demand for housing.
So what do these findings then tell us about what's happening for low-income renters?
So, what we're seeing is that, the rental housing affordability challenges that we're seeing in the city and really in cities across the country are largely driven by pressures on the affordable rental supply. And what that means is as there are fewer and fewer affordable rental units out there, that means low-income renters are struggling to find affordable rental housing, which means that they either have to move elsewhere to neighborhoods or parts of the region where there is more affordable housing, or they stay in place and just pay more of their income towards housing costs.
Jose Munoz, is this surprising that we're seeing this decline on the north and northwest sides? What would you say is contributing to that?
Well, I think what we're seeing today is that, this is decades in the making. We've seen individuals and families being priced out of the community. One, because rents keep going up. Developers are purchasing properties and rehabbing them and making them less affordable for individuals. So individuals are really being pushed out of the community. At the same time, we haven't seen increases in wages and jobs grow enough to a point where individuals are able to raise their incomes to be able to continue to afford that housing. So that's made it very difficult for people to be able to stay in their community.
And Jose, how much of a factor is gentrification?
It's a major factor. I think that's probably one of the biggest contributors to the fact that individuals are losing out on housing. As I mentioned, individuals just there aren't enough single-family homes or smaller units that people can afford, so they have to go and find housing elsewhere.
So, Jeff, Cook County is also seeing a loss of low-income renters, who are the largest group of renters in the county. Why is that?
Well, again, I think that, it's hard to pin down the exact reasons, but I do think that a contributing factor certainly is this issue of declining affordability in many neighborhoods, both in the city of Chicago and in suburban Cook County. As renters struggle to find affordable rental housing, they have to either, again, make that choice of whether or not they want to stay in their community but pay more and maybe continue to put pressure on other types of monthly costs, or move elsewhere to find lower cost housing.
Now, this study measured up until 2019, so right before the pandemic. Jose, what effect has COVID had on the affordable housing market?
Well, I think the biggest impact has been on renters. We've seen a steady increase of individuals who can't afford rent. Now, there was a moratorium in place that allowed individuals to stay housed, but as that was lifted, individuals are having a hard time being able to keep up with rent. Now, luckily, there have been a lot of rental assistance programs. We participated in a few through the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, to try to help individuals be able to cover the cost of their rent. But it still continues to be an issue. We're facing a situation now that's decades in the making. We've seen disinvestment in Black and Brown communities for decades, and now as the market went down, developers purchased up those properties, rehabbed them, rebuilt them, and put them in a price people out. And so, and even though we try to keep up with by creating a more affordable housing, there's just not enough housing available for individuals with lower incomes.
So, Jeff, this study also measured Cook County's affordability gap. First, tell us what that gap is and where is the county in closing it?
So the affordability gap is essentially the mismatch between the number of low-income renters that need affordable rental housing and the supply of affordable units that would be affordable to those low-income renters at 30% of their monthly income. And it's an interesting equation because, what we've seen recently is actually the affordability gap. That mismatch has gone down and it's actually shrunk in the city and in the county. But the reason that it's shrunk is not necessarily good reasons. We've seen actually a decline in those low-income renters, meaning there's actually a decline in quote-unquote demand for affordable rental housing. So you're losing low-income renters and you're also losing that affordable rental supply. So I think that even though that gap might be shrinking slightly, I think there are broader problems that are revealed by sort of some of the inputs that go into that calculation.
Yeah. And Jose Munoz, before we let you all go, how do you think, or what do you think the city should be doing to close this gap?
I think continue to have rental assistance programs like we have in place right now that allow individuals, at least right now, on an emergency basis, to be able to access funds to continue to stay housed and pay their rent. La Casa Norte is operating some of those funds both through the city and the state. I think if you ask me just largely what should happen, I think a universal basic income for individuals to go a long way to solving some of these issues. But in the meantime, I said there are individual programs that are available. And at La Casa Norte, if individuals want to learn more about some of the services that we provide or the rental assistance programs that are available, they can visit us at lacasanorte.org to learn more.
Okay, and that UBI is something we hear a lot about, especially these days. Jeff Smith and Jose Munoz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And up next, as Chicago adds bike lanes, transportation advocates say there is more to do to make cycling equitable. Details on that right after this.
I come from a people that not only found a way to survive through the most horrific circumstances, but they thrived.
I could not save one of the boys of color in my own life. If my family could be exposed to this horror, then really it could happen to anyone. We are truly all in this together.
Cyclists of color in Chicago get a disproportionate number of tickets from police. That's according to reports by the Chicago Tribune. But a new study finds that it's not just about biking while Black or Latino, but also where those cyclists are riding. As Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg reports, bike advocates hope a new city initiative can help address the problem, but say it's not about infrastructure.
Late last month, the Chicago Department of Transportation announced what it says is the largest ever expansion of bike lanes in the city. The 2-year, 100-mile installation and upgrade effort will focus particularly on west and south side neighborhoods that haven't had the kind of bike infrastructure other parts of the city enjoy.
I'm excited about the expansion, but it has to be done very carefully.
UIC's Kate Lowe says some residents associate bike lanes with gentrification and displacement, so community engagement is key. And she wants planners to think beyond just painted lanes.
One thing a lot of bike advocates would like to see more of is protected bike lanes. And that's also relevant to this intersection of policing and bicycle infrastructure.
That intersection was the focus of a new study by Jesus Barajas of UC Davis. It found the same thing as earlier investigations.
More tickets in Black and brown neighborhoods. There were 6 tickets per 1,000 in majority Black neighborhoods and 0.7 per 1,000 in majority white neighborhoods.
But the study went a step further to look at the infrastructure in the areas where tickets were issued. It found that bike lanes were disproportionately missing from majority Black and Latino neighborhoods.
When people are riding on busy streets, they may not feel safe from the traffic that's there, and so they'll go on the sidewalk, and that's where you're going to get your ticket. But when there was any kind of bike infrastructure on those arterial streets, the rate of ticketing went down. in some cases by up to 75%.
The study also found no relationship between the number of tickets issued and the number of bike crashes, particularly serious crashes.
What we suspect, and I would imagine any advocate or any sort of person of color in the city of Chicago would confirm this with their own experience, that this was really a pretext for other kinds of activities for the police. It wasn't tied to safety, it was tied to other reasons.
The study was part of the nonprofit Equiticity's Mobility Justice in Chicago project. Kate Lowe, who serves on Equiticity's research team, says the results point to over-policing in communities of color.
There will be discriminatory policing that needs to change, even with bike lanes, but bike lanes can partially mitigate the impacts.
And as bike lanes expand, Equiticity's calling on Chicago not to heavily rely on police enforcement as part of its Vision Zero strategy to eliminate traffic deaths and serious injuries. Barajas says that's a conversation happening nationwide.
How we can still get to that place of zero traffic deaths without automatically relying on police enforcement.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
The Chicago Police Department has not yet responded to a request for comment. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, we have a historian on deck to talk about Latinos in the major leagues and their enormous impact on this year's White Sox success.
But I was, quite honestly, mortified.
Our Spotlight Politics team breaks down the beef between Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx and Mayor Lori Lightfoot. And Broadway is back, looking at its return to Chicago, starting with the musical Rent. But first, some more of today's top stories. A Chicago Park District supervisor has resigned and is accused of having an inappropriate relationship with an underage lifeguard. That's according to a story first reported by the Chicago Sun-Times. The report states the supervisor had been suspended amid an ongoing internal probe into sexual harassment and abuse among Park District lifeguards. Scandal has brought Park District Superintendent Mike Kelly under fire, with some alderpeople calling for his resignation. The Cook County State's Attorney has also announced a probe into misconduct allegations in that office. The Chicago White Sox report that one of their star players is under the weather, but still on the way to Houston for tomorrow's playoff opener against the Astros. The team says star first baseman Jose Abreu has been battling flu-like symptoms in recent days, but that his symptoms have abated a bit today. The team says multiple tests confirm the symptoms are not COVID-related, but a final decision on whether or not he'll be available for the game will come tomorrow. And of course, in just a few moments, we talk about Abreu and the connection between the White Sox and Chicago's Latino community. And it's official, Bears fans. Moving forward, rookie Justin Fields is the team's starting quarterback. Bears head coach Matt Nagy made the announcement today that Fields would not only be starting this week against Las Vegas, but he is the #1 QB from here on out over veteran Andy Dalton. Fields had a strong outing last week against Detroit, throwing for 209 yards. And we'll have more on this tomorrow with our Bears analyst, James Big Cat Williams. The history of Latinos in baseball goes way back. Players from Minnie Minoso to Luis Aparicio to Ozzie Guillen have been fan favorites on Chicago's South Side for decades. Never has the Latino presence on the White Sox roster been more important than this year, when the Sox could have 7 or more players of Latino heritage starting in the playoffs that begin tomorrow in Houston. And joining us to discuss the impact of Latino players on the White Sox and on baseball in general is Adrian Burgos Jr., a history professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and co-author of the book Play Ball in the Barrios and the Big Leagues. All right, we talked about the history of the White Sox and Latino ball players. How deep does that history go?
Yeah, the Cuban connection of the White Sox really started with Orestes Miñoso, who we all became fans of as Minnie, and it grew from that. Those 1950s White Sox had Aparicio, it had Minnie, there was Jim Rivera, a New York Puerto Rican who was on the team. So that diversity from Venezuela, Cuba, the Caribbean, and even the United States was represented on the Sox, and they brought it back really in a way that was really powerful in the 1990s and 2000s, where we saw Alexei Ramirez and Jose Contreras and El Duque take their turns pitching for the White Sox.
Not to mention former manager Ozzie Guillen. I mean, obviously front office personnel want to put together the best team possible, but was that a thought in their mind to continue that Latino heritage, you think?
I think it was part of their strategy. You see this in both how they use Latino players to recruit one another. Grandal knows about the experience of Jose Abreu there, the experience of Yohan Moncada, the reception these ball players have had. I think the White Sox have been very smart in that they know that if they build a culture that's welcoming to these Cuban players, to Latino players, that they'll love playing for this team. There is a history there. And I mentioned Alexei Ramirez and also Jose Abreu. When the Sox were recruiting these guys, they brought Manny Minoso out to be part of like what brought these players in. And one thing for certain, Cubans know their baseball history. I saw that on the times I was traveling to Cuba to do research. And Abreu and these other ball players, they know that Minoso has a very special place in baseball history. The White Sox know it, and they use that to help bring these players along.
And you're talking about the Cuban connection here, but of course, I mean, countries like Venezuela, Mexico, Puerto Rico are represented. I think Hawk Harrelson made the point that he believed that Latin American-born players played with an extra sort of gusto. They had a little bit more fun. It wasn't so much about analytics. Is that what sets Latin American players apart, do you believe?
Latino players have their own baseball culture in Venezuela. I mean, again, there's a Venezuelan connection of White Sox baseball. It goes Carrasquel to Aparicio to Ozzie Guillen. And, you know, they all play with this desire, but also this joy. I think that what often has caused some strife for a lot of folks who are not Latino in baseball is that Latinos are exuberant. They celebrate their achievements. They celebrate their teammates' achievement, partly because many of these ball players are coming from countries and societies that have been torn apart by political strife, by economic turmoil. And to be a major leaguer, to realize that dream, it's like to celebrate life for them. Like, they made it. They have the opportunity to play in the strongest league in the world, League Baseball, and to excel. And we see that in how Eloy Jimenez jokes around with Elise Robert out in the outfield. And then you see it in the joy of Luis Garcia. And that team, that White Sox team, is so loaded with Latino talent. And, you know, the most serious of them all is Jose Abreu.
Right.
But even you see that smile pop up, and Jose smiles. The rest of the team, they kind of feel like it's going to be all right.
It certainly seems like they have an extra amount of fun playing the game, and I think Hawk Harrelson was lamenting the fact that not all players had that kind of fun. That's what he believes baseball is supposed to be. What about the White Sox marketing outreach? Have they done extra things to sort of, because as we know, the Chicago area has an immense Latino population.
Yeah, the White Sox have done this concentrated effort for well over a decade. They've been involved in community outreach. A couple of years ago, before the pandemic struck and we all went into quarantine, there was this festival I attended in Pilsen, and the Sox had their booth there. They had people from the community relations there. Julissa Montes is one of those individuals who's this connection between the White Sox organization and the community. And she follows a tradition of what the Sox have been doing. The Sox have a very diverse fan base in terms of socioeconomic class, but also in terms of race and ethnicity. When you go to Sox Park, Guaranteed Rate Park, and you walk the pavilion and you walk through the concourse, you smell that ethnic blend. You enjoy the voices of different accents, at least I do. And you get a sense that this is part of the Sox business plan of bringing diverse fans together and giving them a team and a culture to celebrate.
Very quickly, there were some issues about 10 years ago when scouts were convicted of skimming money from Latino players. Has this been a problem? Scouts maybe taking advantage of players that weren't from the country, that didn't speak the language?
but we definitely saw how Major League Baseball began to enact a number of reforms to address this problem of the players being exploited by individuals who are skimming the bonuses. And the entire system, however, of bringing in 16-year-old Latinos from Venezuela, from Colombia, not Colombia, from Dominican Republic, it's a system that the stakes are high to these individual players to get a 50, 70, 100, 200, $1 million signing bonus. And so what MLB has done is try to make sure that the player gets the bonus they signed for. But the system is hinged upon major league teams trying to sign these players ever more cheaply. And the international signing pool has been a mechanism by which they've sought to suppress the signing bonuses that players are getting.
Well, it's an important issue that it looks like Major League Baseball has started to tackle. And the White Sox, of course, begin their series with Houston tomorrow. Jose Abreu, flu-like symptoms, but it looks like he'll be a game-time decision. So we'll watch for that. And our thanks to Adrian Burgos Jr. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
And up next, our Spotlight Politics team breaks down some strong comments from Chicago's richest resident. But first, we take a look at the weather.
Chicago's mayor and the Cook County State's attorney battle each other as gangs get off with no charges in a West Side shootout. That and much more in this week's edition of Spotlight Politics. Joining us now are Amanda Venneke, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. So first team, we know Mayor Lightfoot. She calls out Cook County State's attorney Kim Foxx after no charges are filed in a West Side shootout. Here's what both of them had to say.
We really urge the state's attorney herself to get personally involved, look at the evidence, and I believe that there are charges that can be brought at a minimum against the individuals who initiated the gunfire. We can't live in a world where there's no accountability.
The statements that were made yesterday that were not factually accurate, should this case be ready for charging, may pose potential issues. Nobody wants that. Not for a political stunt.
So, Heather, let's start with you. First of all, why no charges of any sort? No gun charges, no murder, no attempted murder.
Well, this incident started on a West Side block in the Austin neighborhood where a car pulled up to a house and then apparently started firing into that house, and people inside the house returned fire. It was an incredibly chaotic scene that was captured in part on city street cameras. However, that footage did not make it clear exactly who was shooting and who shot first, and that left detectives unable to recommend to Kim Foxx's office about who should be charged and what they should be charged with, which was why I think Kim Foxx was really angry when she heard the mayor said that it was her office's decision to not charge, when we heard directly from Chief of Detectives Brendan Denahan during a city council budget hearing that the police agreed that there wasn't enough charges for anybody to be charged with. Now, the mayor then said, well, what do you mean there's not clarity? There was gunshots, somebody's got to be charged with something, and that's really where we are at this point. This is just the latest conflagration between Mayor Lightfoot and State's Attorney Kim Foxx. We did learn today that the two plan to meet in the coming days to try to sort of talk this out and maybe smooth some ruffled feathers. But this has just become the latest flashpoint in really the increasing political narrative about gun violence and violent crime in Chicago.
So, Amanda, the state's attorney yesterday, she said that she was, quote, mortified by the mayor's comments. Now, we all know the mayor herself is a former federal prosecutor. She, too, says that she heard from CPD, and this was all based on what she had learned from them. But is it clear, or it's not clear, actually, Amanda, what is it that is inaccurate of what the mayor said?
What is clear about this situation, Brandis, is that this incident was horrific. I've seen it referred to as something out of the Wild West. To me, it's really more like an an action movie that but in these really horrific ways, because of course this is a neighborhood where children, where families, where people live, and then you have individuals getting out of a car, kneeling down, and I mean, like in the sort of the like they've got Charlie's Angels like stances, but shooting real guns that left somebody dead. So Kim Foxx, mortified, I am assuming also quite mad, incensed about this. To me, it is also remarkable that it takes a back and forth such as this, considering how much finger pointing has been going on between these two leaders and their offices, to have a meeting. Whoop-dee, how are they not meeting regularly, considering the level of violence that, frankly, everyone should be mortified and horrified by? In terms of what was inaccurate there, so again, as Heather noted, the chief of detectives had said, unclear, inconclusive, who started the shooting and therefore what sort of charges could be brought, but also potentially unclear what sort of strategies the prosecutor's office, and I think that is the point from which the mayor was perhaps approaching this from, how as a prosecutor's office you wouldn't be able to press charges to at least lean on some of the individuals versus letting them be free in the streets, where critics say they can be free to pursue actions like this again. And
Paris, is what Kim Foxx is saying, she's calling this a political move by the mayor, is it?
I mean, I can't deduce what the motivation of the mayor is for saying that. It's clear that the mayor is facing re-election in less than 2 years, and crime in Chicago is going to be her Achilles heel. Opponents will run and say she hasn't done enough to get crime reined in, and the mayor has had this consistent drumbeat of pointing fingers, first to the judges, the Cook County judges, and also to the state's attorney now. And I just have to reiterate, according to data from the Cook County Judge's Office that we talked about a couple months ago, the data doesn't really bear that out, that's responsible for the spike. The data does bear that there's a certain percentage of folks that reoffend. They might be let out, and when they're out on bond or something, they reoffend. But the percentage of that has been the same whether it was now, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So you can't say that from a data perspective is driving this spike, especially as we see this happening all across the nation. One of the deadliest years in America in a long time, and people say COVID and loss of jobs, anxiety, the availability of guns, those things probably do a little bit better to explain what's happening.
So Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown, he also appeared before a city council hearing this week to defend the proposed budget, which has been expanded to nearly $2 billion. Heather, aldermen say he ran a police force in the, quote, most dangerous city in America. Not exactly the friendliest crowd there. What happened during that meeting?
It was a tense hearing where David Brown attempted to sort of say, this is our strategy going forward. And there were several aldermen who just were not have it. I want to point out, though, that even though Alderman Matt O'Shea said that Chicago was the most dangerous city, Chicago is not the most dangerous city, really, by any metric. And I think what some of the aldermen tried to sort of push back on is, how do we address this image of Chicago as a very violent place when it's being reinforced by some of its elected leaders? And that is sort of the rock and the hard place that David Brown finds himself in. Yes, Chicago has a serious violence problem. It is not the most violent city in America, but it has significant challenges, not the least of which that there are nearly 1,000 vacant positions within the police department. And it is going to take a full court press by the city and the police department to try to get those positions filled at a time where police morale is low and interest among young people is low in joining the police department. So that is a big challenge. Also, the $1.9 billion budget that the police department will have is really flat. It includes a significant pay bump for police officers who will get that raise under the contract that we've talked about on this show. But there are no new programs. There are no new initiatives. It's really just sort of, let's try to get a handle on this crime problem with what we have, but there are no easy solutions, and nothing that the mayor or Superintendent Brown has done has really seemed to make any difference in the almost 2 years and a half that David Brown has been on the job.
So in Paris, Kim Foxx has also slammed Superintendent Brown for his weekly press conferences that often blame her office and the courts for criminals being on the streets perpetrating more crimes. Foxx, saying that the mayor does not have a comprehensive violence plan. Does she have a point, or is she doing the same thing?
Maybe a little bit of that. I mean, the mayor has come out with plans. The superintendent has talked about plans. The thing is, they haven't worked. So, I mean, all we see, it's reduced to finger pointing, but I'll go back to that point I made. The data doesn't show that people being softly prosecuted and then going out reoffending is what's driving the spike. Certainly, it is a problem, as it always has been, reoffense. But there's just so many complex things happening right now to cause a spike, and no one has answers that work, I would say.
So meanwhile, Chicago's wealthiest billionaire and civic donor Ken Griffin likens Chicago's violence to Afghanistan. Take a look.
It's becoming ever more difficult to have this as our global headquarters, a city which has so much violence. I mean, Chicago's like Afghanistan on a good day. And that's a problem. I'll put this in black and white. I probably had 25 bullet shots in the glass window of the retail space in the building I live in. They tried to carjack the security detail that sits outside my house. That didn't go so well for the carjacker, but it just tells you how deep crime runs in this city.
Oof. So, Heather, is a threat to yank his headquarters enough to move the needle for politicians to do more to curb violence? Aren't they always focused on violence?
Absolutely. Mayor Lightfoot, Governor Pritzker did not need any more reason to sort of be very focused on the violence problem in Chicago. I think that, the governor reacted quite sharply to Ken Griffin's statements, who he, of course, has funded Republican campaigns for many years now. And the fact of the matter is, as I said before, Chicago is not the most violent city, and it is not at all comparative to Afghanistan, where, of course, there is a literal war going on and an insurgency. So it's that kind of rhetoric that I think a lot of officials feel frustrated by, while acknowledging that Chicago has a real problem. This sort of broad approach that we heard so frequently from former President Donald Trump doesn't really get to the heart of the issue, which, as Paris said, is really difficult to parse. It involves poverty, it involves a lack of investment, it involves a lack of jobs, and it is just not as simple as saying either you stop the crime or I'm going to move my investment firm to New York.
Can I just quickly jump on some other comments he made that I found pretty interesting, unrelated. He was asked about the $3.5 trillion federal spending plan being debated in Washington right now, and he said his answer to that was, "Thank God for Joe Manchin." So obviously really opposed to that, and that might give you kind of a glimpse into the resistance that some folks are feeling. Manchin and Sinema, if Griffin's sentiments are reflective of the top 1%, Wall Street hedge fund managers, about how they feel about that, perhaps that's one reason why this bill is having such a hard time getting full support.
And Amanda, we've got about 30 seconds, but Griffin also attacked, Governor Pritzker. Pritzker, as we know, he's clapped back on that. Real quick history on these two billionaires.
Well, yeah, people say, why does Ken Griffin matter? It matters in part because of the reputation of Chicago, but also because as Pritzker is facing re-election, folks are really wondering who is Griffin going to back. As Pritzker pointed out, Griffin was a big backer of Pritzker's predecessor, Bruce Rauner. Question is, as Republicans are searching really for a candidate that can win statewide support, who is going to have Ken Griffin's backing, a.k.a. his money, to go up against billionaire Pritzker?
Well put and succinct. Thank you very much to Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. For the last 18 months, first close, last to open has been the phrase that theaters across the country have been forced to live by. But after a dark period, doors are open once again. Arts correspondent Angel Edo takes us to the CIBC Theater for Broadway's Chicago return.
Chicago was celebrated at a press conference Tuesday as the best big city in the U.S. for the 5th year in a row. Many say that wouldn't be possible without Chicago's live theater scene.
Chicago is where place and possibility meet. Let us celebrate today and welcome the world back to Chicago.
It's been 822,900 minutes since Broadway in Chicago closed their doors. Now, nearly a year and a half later, they're back with a story that's giving us 525,600 reasons to love.
How do you measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee.
Rent kicked off its 25th anniversary tour in Chicago with reminders Broadway in Chicago president Lou Raisin says we can all use.
The show speaks to community. It speaks to coming together. And it speaks to understanding time and how time is precious. And the last 18 months surely showed us that. That time is precious.
With Broadway and Chicago staff going from 1,000 to 14, this celebration has been a long time coming.
It feels really nice. I'm really excited to be able to share that connection with the audience again and feel that energy that has been missing for so long. And especially Rent, I wouldn't want to be doing any other show except for Rent. Specifically because its story just means so much.
It also draws similarities to our post-pandemic reality.
It's speaking towards our future. It's trying to lead people towards change. Like what happened in the AIDS epidemic, like forcing things to be led to change. All these clinical researches and studies, or like now there is medicine it's not getting rid of it, but it's keeping people from dying. We have vaccines keeping people from dying. I mean, the parallels are insane. It's crazy.
As for the future of live theater in Chicago, Raisin says it's crawling back so it can remain the Silicon Valley of theaters and keep all 250 stages alive and thriving.
From a Broadway in Chicago standpoint, there's no city in the country outside of New York that does what we're able to do in Chicago.
9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. From here on in, I shoot without a script.
It's always fear, and fear always strikes everywhere. But this show is like, release that fear, give into love, and literally live for today.
525,600 minutes.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
So
and Rent fans have until this Sunday, October 10th, to see this show in person with afternoon and evening performances on both Saturday and Sunday. And a reminder that attendees are required to show proof of vaccination and wear masks throughout the performance. You can visit our website for more information. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. President Joe Biden visits Chicago to promote vaccine mandates for large businesses.
And at the 150th anniversary of the Great Chicago Fire, a new exhibit takes an innovative approach. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.